she hadn't planned on making a scene. She only wanted to check in, set her bags down, and disappear into a quiet corner of the hotel she technically owned. But the moment the black card left her fingers, the room shifted like the chandeliers themselves leaned in to listen. The front desk clerk blinked at the card as if it were a joke, then laughed under her breath and said, "Ma'am, this isn't yours." Conversations around the lobby dimmed. A man in a navy suit smirked. Someone at the bar whispered, "Here we go again." And in that instant, before a single insult had fully formed, the air changed from soft luxury to something sharp enough to cut. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change. And we're glad you're here. Now, back to her. She didn't flinch when the clerk pushed the card back toward her with two fingers like it might burn. She didn't react when the manager stepped out from a glass office, lips curled in amusement as he eyed her jeans and plain black tee like they were crimes against interior design. "We've had people try this before," he said, voice coated in false professionalism. "Fake black cards, stolen ones, and they always think confidence will get them through verification." A couple standing behind her shifted, giving her the kind of look people reserve for troublemakers and trespassers. Another employee walked over just to get a better view, arms crossed, amusement blooming across her face. "She really thought she could walk in here with that," the woman whispered, not quietly enough. The manager reached for the card without asking, snatching it like he was catching a thief in the act. He turned it under the lobby lights, inspecting it with a dramatic sigh. "Heavy," he muttered. "Good fake, though." He lifted his chin at security, giving a subtle nod that wasn't subtle at all. The guard started walking toward her before she even realized the accusation had escalated. She kept her hands at her sides, still, anchored not by fear, but by a patience honed from years of navigating rooms dressed exactly like this one. Rooms where marble floors hid ugly truths, and gold accents couldn't cover the sting of entitlement. And then came the words. "That cracked the lobby. We'll need you to step aside before we involve the police." A few gasps, a few stifled laughs. She blinked once, slowly. Not in shock. In recognition. She'd been here before. Different city, different year, different faces, but the same tone. The same certainty that she didn't belong. The same reflex to treat her confidence as a threat and her presence as a mistake. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't explain herself. She simply looked at the manager still gripping her card like evidence and said, calm as breath, "Are you sure you want to do this?" He scoffed. "Positive." And in that moment, the clock started ticking not toward her removal, but toward their collapse. The manager did not answer her question. He simply tightened his grip on the black card as if holding it harder would expose some hidden truth. The security guard stopped at her shoulder, posture rigid, ready to escalate a situation she had not created. The lobby was no longer quiet. It hummed with the low static of judgment, curiosity, and something uglier just beneath. The manager lifted the card again, tilting it under the lights like a cheap detective in an old drama. "These cards are metal," he announced loudly, making sure the nearby guests heard every word. "Anyone can order a replica online. You cannot just show up and pretend you have this kind of access." She kept her gaze steady. Calm was her shield, but it was also her test. She watched him, watched the way his eyes refused to see her as anything beyond the pre-written story in his mind. A young woman at the far end of the counter paused her check-in, her brows drawing together. "I saw it scan," the woman murmured, almost to herself. The manager snapped, "Stay out of this." He waved at the screen, pretending to scroll. "There is no reservation under her name. None. She is wasting our time." That was the moment the clerk beside him leaned over just enough to whisper, "She does not even look like someone who would stay here." The comment was soft, but not soft enough. A few guests nearby looked at each other with raised eyebrows, a silent mix of discomfort and agreement. The manager pushed further. "Ma'am, if you do not produce a second form of identification, we will cancel this entire interaction." She reached into her bag slowly, deliberately, pulling out a state-issued identification card and placing it on the counter. The clerk picked it up, scoffed, and said, "You expect us to believe this belongs to you?" The security guard added, "You need to step aside now." Her breathing stayed even, but her patience thinned like glass under pressure. Memories flickered without invitation, being 20 years old, handing over a check from her first commission only to be told it was too large to be legitimate, being 30 and mistaken for an assistant in a boardroom she owned, being 40 and asked if she was visiting the penthouse floor she had personally redesigned. It was always the same tone. The same disbelief. The same refusal to see her. The manager dropped her identification onto the counter with a dull slap. "This is not proof," he said. "This is a performance." He raised his chin at security again. "Escort her to the seating area while we call the authorities." The guard moved closer, inches from her. Guests turned fully now, abandoning subtlety. Phones lifted discreetly. Others whispered, "She is in trouble," or, "This is getting serious." And then, cutting through the swelling humiliation, the young woman at the end of the counter spoke louder than before. "Her name is in the system," she said. "I saw it earlier. Penthouse level. Executive clearance." The manager's head snapped toward her, fury snapping just beneath the surface. "You must be mistaken," he said sharply. But the room had already shifted. The tide had already begun to turn. And for the first time since she walked into the lobby, she let the smallest spark of power return to her voice. "You just made this much worse than you think." The manager opened his mouth to shut the young woman down, but the damage was already done. The lobby's attention swung toward him, suspicion rising like heat off the marble floor. He straightened his blazer, forcing confidence back into his posture, and said loudly, "Our staff is trained to identify fraudulent activity, and this situation is clearly escalating." He pointed at the black card still in his hand, as if its weight justified his prejudice. "This will be verified through corporate security." The security guard stepped closer to her again, his voice low but firm. "Ma'am, you need to comply before this becomes a bigger problem." She lifted her chin slightly, not in defiance, but in a quiet refusal to shrink. "A bigger problem for whom?" she asked. The guard blinked, thrown by her composure. Before he could answer, the clerk beside him muttered, "This is ridiculous. People try to play rich every week, but this one is bold." A couple near the velvet lounge chairs shook their heads, whispering to each other, "She should just leave before it gets worse," and "Security is about to drag her out." The manager tapped the counter with theatrical impatience. "You are holding up real guests," he said. "And until the authorities arrive, your presence at this desk is considered a disruption." She watched him carefully, watched the way he wrapped his prejudice in polished language, watched how easily he weaponized protocol. This was not unfamiliar. Not new. Not surprising. The young woman who had first spoken up hesitated only a moment before stepping forward. Her voice trembled slightly but carried across the lobby. "I am telling you the truth. I literally saw her name in the system when I clocked in this morning." The manager barked, "Enough. You do not have clearance to discuss guest profiles." "But you do," a man near the bar asked, raising an eyebrow. Conversation shifted. Phones lifted a little higher. The clerk hissed, "Sir, please do not interfere," but it was too late. The crowd had begun to see the cracks. The manager doubled down, turning his frustration into volume. "This woman is attempting to access a luxury suite with a possibly stolen card. We are protecting the hotel." The security guard placed a hand near his radio. "Should I call for backup?" The question made several guests gasp. She did not move. She did not flinch. She kept her voice level, almost soft, but steady enough to slice through the noise. "You can call whomever you want," she said. "But before you do, give me my card back." The manager squeezed it tighter, refusing. "Absolutely not. This stays with us until we confirm its origin." She took one slow step forward, and the entire room seemed to hold its breath. "By holding my property without consent," she said, "you have already crossed a legal line." The guard frowned. The clerk shifted uneasily. The young woman at the end of the counter whispered, "She is right." But the manager pushed past the warning signs. "Security," he commanded, "remove her from the front desk immediately." The guard reached for her arm. He did not touch her yet, but the motion was enough. Phones rose higher. Someone whispered, "This is going to go viral." And then, with perfect stillness, she said, "Take one more step, and you will regret it more than you regret anything else today." The lobby froze. The guard hesitated. The manager stared, confused by the sudden shift in energy. Because although she had not raised her voice, something in the room had changed, something in her tone told everyone that they had misjudged her entirely, and the consequences were already on their way. The guard stopped mid-reach, frozen in the space between intention and consequence, and for the first time since this confrontation began, the lobby felt as if it were holding its breath. The manager scoffed at her warning, but there was a flicker behind his eyes, a hint of doubt he could not quite hide. He leaned closer, lowering his voice in an attempt to regain control. "You are not intimidating anyone. You are a guest who refuses to follow protocol, and there will be consequences." She did not step back. She did not blink. Instead, she reached slowly into her pocket, not for identification and not for another card, but for her phone. She tapped a single contact, lifted it to her ear, and said just one word with a calmness that cut deeper than any threat. "Begin." The reaction was immediate on the other end. A woman's voice responded with crisp efficiency. "Protocol is active. I am pulling the reservation logs and all staff timestamps now. Do you want verification broadcast to the lobby or internal only?" The manager's face went pale. "Who are you calling? You cannot make corporate threats to avoid security procedures." She kept the phone to her ear, gaze still on him. "Internal for now," she said. "I want every word documented, especially the part where he refused to return my property." The clerk stiffened. "She is bluffing." But the young woman who had spoken earlier shook her head with visible certainty. "She is not." The manager tried to recover, but the words came out brittle. "I do not care who you think you are. Your reservation does not exist in our system, and until we confirm otherwise, your card is being held for security." The voice on the phone spoke again, loud enough that several nearby guests could hear. "I have your reservation, executive tier, confirmed at 7:28 this morning. I also have a note indicating corporate ownership privileges. I am linking it to their system now. Stand by." Gasps rippled across the lobby. The clerk backed up a step. The guard lowered his hand. The manager's mouth opened, but no sound emerged. "There must be a mistake," he finally managed. "We would see that in our system." She lowered the phone just enough for him to see her expression. It was calm, steady, and unshakably certain. "Then maybe you should look again." The young woman at the end of the counter moved first, stepping around her workstation and tapping the screen with deliberate care. Within seconds, the reservation flashed into view, highlighted by a gold corporate indicator that only upper management ever received. "It is here," she said clearly. "It has been here the whole time." Murmurs erupted. Someone near the bar muttered, "He hid it," and another whispered, "They really thought she was lying." The manager lunged toward the monitor, scrolling, tapping, scanning every line as though the truth might rearrange itself if he pushed hard enough. But nothing changed. Her name glowed on the screen with undeniable authority. The voice on the phone added, "Do you need me to escalate further? Corporate security is on standby." She met the manager's eyes and spoke softly, almost gently. "Do you still believe this is a performance?" His posture collapsed inch by inch, but pride kept him standing. You should have said something sooner," he muttered, struggling for footing. She answered with a quiet power that filled the entire lobby. "I did. You just refused to listen." And in that single moment, every person watching understood exactly what that meant. The manager's face flushed a deep, angry red, the kind that comes from being caught in a lie he had been certain no one would ever challenge. But instead of apologizing or stepping back, he doubled down, grabbing onto the last shred of authority he thought he still had. "Even if the reservation exists," he said, forcing confidence back into his cracking voice, "your behavior has violated protocol, and we have every right to remove you from the premises." The lobby reacted with a chorus of disbelief. Someone near the bar whispered, "He is still going?" Another guest muttered, "He cannot admit he is wrong." She did not break eye contact. "Your staff hid my reservation," she said. "Your staff confiscated my property without cause. And your staff escalated a situation built entirely on bias." The manager snapped, "Do not accuse us of discrimination. We treat all guests the same." It was the oldest, weakest defense. Before she could speak, the young woman at the end of the counter stepped forward again, louder this time, her voice trembling with anger. "No, you do not," she said. "I watched you ignore her when she walked in. I watched you scan her from head to toe before she even spoke. You never do that when certain people arrive." The clerk hissed, "Watch your tone," but her warning landed flat. The room was no longer on their side. A man with silver hair and a business briefcase walked closer, speaking with calm authority. "She complied with everything you asked," he said. "You escalated. Not her." The manager glared at him. "Sir, this is a private hotel matter." "Not anymore," the man replied. "You made it public the moment you raised your voice and called security." The manager turned back to her, desperate to regain control. "You are not special. You do not get to rewrite hotel procedures just because you feel slighted." That word hit harder than he expected. Slighted. As if all of this, the assumptions, the humiliation, the public suspicion, were merely her overreaction. She felt something tighten in her chest, something old. A memory rose uninvited, sharp and clear. She was 24, standing in the lobby of a boutique hotel after a red-eye flight, wearing sweatpants and a backpack she had carried since college. The clerk had looked at her credit card and said, "We do not accept cards that have been tampered with." She had slept in her rental car that night, shivering under a thin blanket while guests who looked nothing like her walked in effortlessly. The shame of that moment had carved something permanent into her, not weakness, not bitterness, but resolve. Back in the present, she exhaled once, slow and steady, letting the memory settle before speaking. "Do you know what it feels like to be treated as suspicious every time you walk into a room you can afford? To have your legitimacy questioned before your name is even spoken?" The manager rolled his eyes. "This is unnecessary." But the guard, the clerk, and several guests did not move. They listened. Because whether they admitted it or not, every person in the room knew her words were true. She stepped closer, and the quiet strength in her voice carried across the marble floor. "This is not about protocol. This is about the story you decided about me the moment you saw my face." The lobby fell silent, heavy, and undeniable. The manager attempted one last push, pointing at her phone. "I will not be intimidated by whatever game you are playing." She lifted her chin slightly. "This is not a game," she said. "This is accountability." And in that instant, a new energy rippled through the room. Not anger. Not outrage. Recognition. The kind that precedes a breaking point the entire lobby was now inching toward. The manager tried to hold his ground, but the shift in the lobby was undeniable now. Guests were no longer pretending not to watch. Phones were raised openly, capturing every breath, every twitch, every word. The clerk stepped closer to him, whispering, "Maybe we should just give her the card back," but he shook his head sharply, pride blinding him to the disaster unraveling in real time. She stood still in the center of it, not elevated, not dramatic, but unwavering, the kind of calm that does not come from fearlessness but from a lifetime of surviving other people's assumptions. She lifted her phone again, her voice even. "Confirmed documentation," she said. On the other end, the woman responded instantly. "Audio log is running. Reservation confirmed. Staff misconduct is marked. Do you want me to connect corporate legal?" The clerk flinched visibly. The guard took a half step back. The manager raised his voice, louder than before, as if volume would restore the authority he had lost. You cannot strong-arm this establishment with threats. We are following standard procedures. The young woman at the end of the counter countered quickly, your standard procedure does not include hiding reservations or seizing personal property. Several guests murmured in agreement. The man with the silver briefcase folded his arms, watching with the focus of someone who had seen this kind of power struggle before. A woman with a stroller stepped closer, her expression stern. She asked for her card back 10 minutes ago, she said. And you refused. That is not protocol. The manager ignored it all. He pointed at the guard. Remove her from the front desk immediately. That is an order. The guard hesitated. His eyes flicked to the guests, then back to her, then finally to the manager. He did not move. He was not willing to gamble his job on what had clearly shifted into very dangerous territory. Sir, he said carefully, maybe we should wait for verification. The manager exploded. We have verification. I verified it myself. The clerk opened her mouth. Closed it. Opened it again. But you did not, she whispered. You did not even check properly. He turned on her with a glare sharp enough to cut. Do you want to lose your job today? That was when it happened. The moment that mirrored the structure of every story like this but still landed with a visceral weight. The moment when a witness becomes something else entirely. The young woman stepped out from behind the counter, shoulders squared, voice steady. Sir, I want to be clear. I saw her name. I did not hide it. I did not erase it. I did not alter anything. But I saw you swipe past it when it first appeared. Gasps cracked through the lobby. The manager's jaw dropped, disbelief and rage twisting his expression. You are lying, he snapped. You are absolutely lying. She shook her head. I am not. And you know I am not. The clerk looked sick. The guard stared at the floor. Every guest leaned in, pulled by the gravity of truth finally surfacing. The manager lifted the black card again, holding it like a shield. This card is staying in our possession until I say otherwise. She stared at him, her voice lowering to something quiet enough that everyone had to lean in to hear it. Return my card. Right now. The manager smirked, something smug and reckless. Or what? That was the exact moment her assistant's voice echoed through the phone with perfect timing. Corporate wants confirmation. Should I initiate the disciplinary review? The lobby fell silent. She did not look away from the manager. Yes, she said. Initiate everything. And the room felt the ground shift as though an invisible line had finally been crossed, and nothing, not protocol, not pride, not prejudice, could pull it back. The word initiate had barely left her lips when the shift rippled through the lobby like a pressure wave, subtle at first, then undeniable. The manager stood rigid, card still clenched in his hand, but for the first time a shadow of uncertainty crept across his face. Her assistant's voice came through the phone again, crisp and professional. Disciplinary review has been activated. I am sending the incident file to corporate security. All timestamps, audio logs, and reservation records have been locked. Do you want this mirrored to the hotel's regional director? The manager's composure fractured. You have no authority to contact our regional director, he snapped, but even he did not sound convinced anymore. She kept her gaze steady, lowering the phone just enough that her words cut cleanly through the tension. I have more authority than you think. A man near the lounge whispered, she is not bluffing, and another guest raised his phone higher, recording with deliberate clarity. The clerk began fidgeting with her necklace, shifting from foot to foot as though the floor beneath her had grown unstable. The guard moved fully out of the manager's reach, no longer willing to stand shoulder to shoulder with someone whose decisions were unraveling live in front of a growing audience. The manager shook his head quickly, speaking too fast now. This is completely out of proportion. You should have told us who you were. This entire situation could have been avoided. She took a single step forward, not aggressive, just definitive. I should not have to announce my value for you to treat me with basic respect. The young woman who had defended her nodded vigorously. Exactly. That is exactly the point. The manager's voice cracked with panic he tried and failed to hide. I did not hide her reservation. That is a lie. The clerk stared at him, guilt finally surfacing. Sir, I watched you scroll past it. I did not understand why you did it, but you did. His face contorted with rage. You are all misunderstanding protocol. This is how we prevent fraud. But even that excuse could not hold. The man with the silver briefcase stepped forward, addressing him with the tone of someone used to commanding rooms. Fraud prevention does not include confiscating property, ignoring system confirmations, or threatening a compliant guest with removal. A ripple of agreement moved through the crowd. Someone whispered, "He is finished." Someone else murmured, "This is what discrimination looks like." The manager attempted to regain footing, clutching the black card tighter. This card stays with me until we finish our verification. That is final. She looked at the card, then at him, and her expression shifted into something precise, measured, and devastating. You mocked me for paying with a black card, she said. Her voice carried across the entire lobby, impossibly calm and impossibly sharp. A card that does more for this hotel than you ever have. The silence that followed was not empty, it was charged, electric, the kind of silence that precedes a revelation no one can take back. Her assistant spoke through the phone, voice firm and clear enough for several guests to hear. Corporate security is connected. They want your authorization to proceed with identity disclosure. The manager swallowed hard. Identity disclosure? What is that supposed to mean? She lifted her chin, and the room seemed to tilt toward her. This was the moment the arc demanded. The quiet before the truth detonated. The calm before the authority shifted completely. It means, she said, her tone soft but final, it is time for you to find out exactly who you have been talking to. And the lobby braced itself for the impact. The lobby seemed to contract around her as she lowered the phone, every gaze locked onto the space between her and the manager. His breath hitched, shallow and uneven, the first sign that the authority he had clung to was slipping through his fingers. What exactly are you implying? He demanded, but the edge in his voice had dulled, it wavered, thinned, and cracked under the pressure of an audience that no longer saw him as the one in control. She did not rush. She did not raise her voice. She simply lifted the phone again and said, "Proceed." Her assistant replied instantly, "Copy." Corporate security will now verify ownership status across all linked accounts. Displaying credentials on your screen in 3, 2, the manager's computer chimed before the assistant could finish. A bright gold banner flooded the monitor, flashing a message that several guests near the desk could clearly read. Owner-level account. Priority clearance required. The clerk gasped. The guard's posture straightened. The manager lunged toward the screen as if he could physically smother the truth with his hands. This must be an error. This is not possible. Anyone could fake this. Interface. The young woman who had defended her shook her head. Sir, that is the official corporate dashboard. We cannot edit that. No one here can. A man from the lounge stepped closer, folding his arms. You should give her back the card, he said. Before this becomes worse than it already is. The manager ignored him, staring at the monitor with wild eyes, scrolling frantically, desperate to find a way out of the corner he had built himself into. There has to be an explanation, he muttered. Someone hacked the system. Her assistant's voice emerged again, calm and precise. Security logs show no breach. Credentials confirm ownership tied to executive authority. Do you need verbal confirmation for all staff on site? She looked directly at the manager. Yes, she said. Make it explicit. A new voice took over the line, deeper, colder, unmistakably corporate. This is Director Hayes with Horizon Corporate Security. Verification complete. The guest you are detaining is one of the primary owners of this hotel and all affiliated regional properties. You are instructed to return her property immediately and stand down. The words echoed through the lobby like a gavel strike. Guests froze. The clerk dropped her pen. The guard stepped aside completely, hands visible, making it clear he wanted no part in what was coming. The manager's face drained of color. "Owner," he repeated, the word barely audible. "That is not, that cannot." She took one step closer, steady and deliberate. "You called me a fraud," she said quietly, "in a place I own." The lobby erupted in whispers. Phones rose higher than before. Someone near the elevators said, "I knew it. I knew she was someone powerful." The manager tried to speak, but only fragments came out. "If we had known, if you had said something, we would have treated you differently." She tilted her head slightly, disappointment sharpening her expression. "Exactly," she said. "That is the problem." Her assistant spoke again, this time with finality. "Ma'am, corporate is requesting one more confirmation. Do you want us to proceed with disciplinary actions for all staff involved?" The manager's eyes widened with fear, and for the first time since the confrontation began, he truly saw the consequences standing in front of him. She inhaled once, the kind of breath that carries years of battles too similar to this one. Then she spoke with quiet authority, every syllable a verdict. "Yes," she said. "Proceed." And the lobby fell silent, waiting for the collapse. The collapse did not happen all at once, it unfolded second by second, layer by layer, like a structure whose foundation had quietly cracked long before anyone noticed. The line remained open, and the corporate security director's voice carried through the lobby speakers with the cold efficiency of someone who had executed this procedure many times before. "Acknowledged. Disciplinary protocol is active. All staff involved are now locked out of the Horizon system pending immediate removal." The manager's tablet buzzed sharply, then went dark. His login badge blinked red. The clerk's screen froze, credentials revoked. The guard's radio chimed with an alert that made him instinctively step back from her, hands raised slightly as if to show he meant no harm. A gasp rolled through the room. Someone whispered, "It is happening live," while another murmured, "I have never seen anything like this." The manager lurched toward his computer, tapping keys that no longer responded. "This is a malfunction," he insisted, voice trembling. "This is not how the system works. This is not protocol." Her assistant came through the phone with a tone sharper than before. "Protocol has been confirmed at the highest level. Staff access suspended. Legal is reviewing the incident." The clerk started to cry quietly, covering her mouth with a trembling hand. The young woman who had defended her stepped forward, not gloating, not triumphant, but clear in her conviction. "This happened because you refused to listen," she said softly. "Not because of who she is, but because of who you chose to be." The manager spun toward her. "You do not understand what you have done. You just cost everyone here their jobs." The young woman stood straighter. "No," she replied. "You did." The man with the silver briefcase nodded slowly, adding, "Actions have consequences, especially when you treat people like threats instead of guests." The manager turned back to her, desperation twisting his features. "Please," he said, "you have made your point. Just tell them to reverse this. I can fix this. We can start over." She looked at him for a long moment, and the room held its breath again. When she finally spoke, her voice was low, steady, and unmistakably resolute. "You cannot start over when you refuse to acknowledge what you did." He took a step toward her, but the guard lifted an arm in front of him, not to defend her, but to stop him from digging himself deeper. "Sir," the guard said, "I think it is best you wait for corporate to arrive." The manager's face collapsed further, pride dismantling piece by piece. "You do not understand," he pleaded. "I was following procedure." She shook her head. "No. You were following your assumptions." The corporate director's voice returned one final time. "Ma'am, disciplinary records are being finalized. Horizon Human Resources will arrive within minutes. Do you wish to escalate to immediate termination?" The lobby froze. The clerk sobbed harder. A few guests stared at the floor. Even the manager stopped breathing for a heartbeat. She inhaled, slow and deliberate. Her gaze moved across the room, lingering on the faces of the people who had watched silently at first, then on the young woman who had spoken up, then finally back to the manager who had orchestrated every moment of humiliation she had endured. "This is not about revenge," she said quietly. "This is about responsibility." She paused, letting the weight of the moment settle. "Proceed with termination." A collective gasp broke through the lobby as the final word left her lips. The manager's badge flashed red one last time, then powered off completely, the digital equivalent of a door slamming shut. And in that instant, everyone understood that the balance of power in the room had changed forever. The manager stood frozen, the red light on his badge still flickering faintly as if refusing to accept its own death. The lobby felt impossibly still, a suspended moment where every person present understood they had witnessed something irreversible. But the collapse was not finished, it was only beginning to unspool. The corporate security director spoke again through the phone in her hand, his tone measured and authoritative. "Termination protocol confirmed. Regional oversight and legal representatives are en route. Estimated arrival, 6 minutes." The clerk staggered back from the counter, her voice thin and shaking. "I did not mean for this to happen. I did not think. I just did what he said." The young woman who had defended her earlier looked at her, not unkindly, but with a clarity that left no room for misinterpretation. "Following instructions does not excuse mistreating guests," she said. "You made choices. We all saw them." The guard, now entirely separated from the manager's authority, approached her cautiously. "Ma'am," he said, his voice respectful in a way it had never been before, "would you like me to retrieve your card from the safe?" Before she could answer, the manager exploded. "Do not touch that safe. That card stays locked until corporate arrives. I may have lost my badge, but I still have rights." The guard shook his head firmly. "Not anymore, sir. Not after what we just heard." Then he turned back to her. "With your permission?" She nodded once. The guard disappeared behind the counter, and the metallic click of the safe's unlocking mechanism echoed through the lobby like a punctuation mark, sharp and final. The manager lunged forward, desperation rising in his voice. "You are making a mistake. All of you. She walked in here looking like," he stopped himself, but too late. The sentence hung unfinished in the air, exposing the truth behind every decision he had made. A woman near the elevators murmured, "That is exactly the problem," and someone else whispered, "He still does not get it." The guard returned, holding the black card with both hands, as if it were something sacred. He extended it to her with a solemnity the moment deserved. "Your property, ma'am." She accepted it gently, but the gesture carried the weight of everything that had led to this point. The manager was unraveling now, pacing, breathing hard, his voice trembling with the fear of consequences catching up. "You could have just told us. You could have spared us all of this humiliation." She looked at him with a steadiness that made the entire room lean closer. "I do not owe you my resume to be treated with respect," she said. "Your behavior was the humiliation. I simply refused to accept it quietly." The clerk wiped her eyes, whispering, "I am sorry," but even she knew apologies could not roll back what had happened. The corporate director's voice returned with a tone that signaled the transition from judgment to enforcement. "Horizon Human Resources has entered the building. Security teams are preparing for staff removal. Please remain where you are until they make contact." The manager turned toward her again, eyes wide with the final realization that his career, reputation, and authority had collapsed in front of a room full of witnesses. "Please," he said, voice cracking, "do not let them take everything." She considered him for a long, quiet moment, then answered with the calm truth that had been building since the moment he first dismissed her. "I am not taking anything from you," she said. "You handed it away." And the lobby, filled with echoing breaths and unblinking silence, understood that the reckoning was complete. The glass doors at the front of the lobby slid open with a soft hiss, and every head turned as 3 members of the Horizon Human Resources disciplinary team walked in, flanked by 2 corporate security officers in tailored suits. They did not rush. They did not hesitate. They moved with the calm precision of people who dealt with high-stakes situations regularly, people who had already read the files and already made their determinations before ever stepping inside. The manager's face drained of what little color he had left. "No," he whispered, stumbling back a step. "They are already here? This cannot be happening this quickly." The lead representative, a woman in a charcoal blazer with an identification badge clipped neatly to her pocket, walked directly toward the center of the lobby. Her voice was even, formal, and unmistakably final. "We are here to address the incident involving staff misconduct, procedural violations, and the mistreatment of a verified owner-level guest." The whispering in the lobby surged again. Several guests stepped aside to give the representatives a clear path, and the clerk folded in on herself as if trying to disappear behind the front desk. The manager tried to gather himself, smoothing his hair, straightening his shirt, rehearsing excuses he had already used. "I can explain," he said quickly. "The system malfunctioned. There was confusion about her identity. My staff panicked. I panicked. This is not a fair representation of my professionalism." The representative held up a hand, silencing him effortlessly. "We will not be discussing professionalism today," she said. "We will be discussing conduct." She turned to her. "Ma'am, we have reviewed the preliminary audio and digital logs. Corporate security has already authenticated your status and cross-verified your reservation history. Before we proceed with the formal handover, is there anything additional you would like documented for the final record?" The entire lobby seemed to tilt toward her, waiting, bracing, listening. She did not raise her voice. "Document that they were given chances," she said. "Document that they ignored every opportunity to correct their actions." The representative nodded. "Noted." She turned toward the manager. Her voice sharpened. "Please surrender your badge, tablet, company phone, and access keys." The words hit him like blows. His breathing quickened. "You cannot do this without a hearing," he protested. "You cannot terminate someone on the spot." "We can," the representative said, "and we are. The evidence is irrefutable, the violations are recorded, and corporate has already signed off." The clerk let out a small whimper. Do I have to surrender mine too?" The representative looked at her with cool professionalism. "Yes. You are under immediate suspension pending review. Security will escort you to retrieve your personal items." Tears streamed down the clerk's cheeks as she removed her badge with shaking hands. The guard to her right took a step back, exhaling heavily as he realized his position had been spared. He looked at her with genuine remorse. "Ma'am, I am sorry. I should have stepped in sooner." She nodded once, acknowledging his honesty, then shifted her attention back to the manager, who was unraveling in front of the entire room. "You do not understand what this means for me," he said, voice breaking as he handed over his badge. "You do not know how long I have worked here. I have a family." She met his eyes with a calm he could not comprehend. "I am not punishing your family," she said. "I am holding you accountable." He tried one last time to reach for sympathy. "If I had known who you were," she cut him off with quiet finality. "That is the problem. You needed my title to treat me like a human being." Silence spread through the lobby again, deeper than before, shaped by the weight of what everyone had just heard. Horizon Security stepped forward, taking their positions on either side of the manager and the clerk. The representative closed her tablet. "This concludes the on-site disciplinary action. Staff removal will begin now." And just like that, the collapse became complete. The lobby remained hushed as the disciplinary team escorted the former manager and the suspended clerk toward the employee hallway, each step echoing like the closing of a chapter they had written themselves. Guests parted silently to let them through, their faces a mixture of disbelief, vindication, and something heavier, the recognition that they had witnessed an imbalance of power flip entirely without a single raised voice from the woman who had been wronged. She stood in the center of the room, the black card resting calmly in her hand now, no longer a symbol of suspicion but of the truth that had always been hers. The guard approached her again, quieter than before, sincerity anchored in every word. "Ma'am, if there is anything you need, anything at all, I can assist you personally." She offered a small, steady nod. "Thank you. I will let you know." Her assistant's voice came through the phone once more, softer now that the crisis had passed. "Corporate has finalized the report. Legal will follow up with written documentation. Additionally, the regional director has asked whether you want to proceed with operational restructuring at this location." She inhaled, letting a long breath settle the last of the adrenaline beneath her ribs. "Not today," she said. "We will review it next week." "Understood," her assistant replied. "Do you want a car sent for you?" Her eyes drifted across the lobby, over the marble floors, over the guests who watched her with newfound reverence, and finally to the young woman who had spoken up on her behalf. "Send one for her," she said gently. "She is going home early today." The young woman's eyes widened in surprise, then softened with gratitude. She mouthed, "Thank you," emotion tightening her voice even without sound. As corporate security began sealing the administrative office doors and handing temporary access badges to the remaining staff, the Horizon representative approached her with measured respect. "Ma'am, we apologize on behalf of the company. This should never have happened." She met the woman's gaze, her voice calm, not angry, not triumphant, simply true. "Apologies matter," she said, "but accountability matters more. Make sure this becomes training, not damage control." The representative nodded firmly. "It will." With the crisis now behind her, she turned toward the counter where the nightmare had begun less than an hour earlier. The young woman hurried back to her station, pulling up the reservation with careful hands. "Your penthouse suite is ready," she said. "I will personally escort you whenever you are ready." But she did not move toward the elevators. Instead, she stepped lightly toward the center of the lobby, lifting her voice just enough for everyone to hear. "Let me say something before I go." Conversations halted. Guests lifted their eyes. Even the remaining staff paused mid-step. "You all witnessed what happened here today," she said. "And I want you to remember something. I did not raise my voice. I did not cause a scene. I did not force anyone's hand. I simply stood in the truth of who I am." Her tone stayed even, steady as the marble beneath her feet. "Dignity is not loud. Power does not need volume. Justice does not ask for permission. It arrives when people stop accepting less than they deserve." The lobby breathed in her words, imprinting them like a lesson carved into stone. She turned at last toward the private elevator reserved for owners, sliding her black card through the reader. The doors opened instantly. Before stepping inside, she looked back one final time and said, "Raise your standards. The world adjusts." Then the doors closed, and the lobby exhaled as if released from a spell, left forever changed by the woman they had misjudged until it was far too late.